17th century, there lived an English goldsmith whose fortunes were intertwined with those of 5 rivaling maritime powers: England, France, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands. Whose ships traversed the seas in pursuit of wealth, commerce, and territorial expansion across the globe. He played a pivotal role in England's financial affairs while these competing powers operated under the influence of the doctrine of discovery and the economic philosophy of mercantilism. The doctrine of discovery is a concept established upon 3 public papal decrees during the 15th century: Dum Diversis, Romanus Pontifex, and Inter Caetera. It asserts that Christian rulers possess divine authority over territories inhabited by non-Christians, denying indigenous peoples sovereignty and property rights. It paved the way for conquest, dispossession of property, perpetual enslavement, and genocide. The effects of which yet remain today. Although Protestant monarchs rejected the authority of Rome, they adopted assumptions similar to those embodied in the doctrine of discovery. Indigenous peoples were frequently judged according to European standards of agriculture, writing, architecture, and statecraft. Societies lacking familiar forms of cultivation, written language, or permanent masonry structures were often regarded as uncivilized, while lands occupied by non-Christians were treated as vacant or subject to the concept later associated with terra nullius, or nobody's land. Such views stood in tension with moral principles professed by these same societies. The commandment, "Thou shalt not steal," coexisted with territorial expansion. The words attributed to Jesus, "The thief comes not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy," echoed against the realities of conquest. Likewise, one of the declarations of innocence among the 42 principles of Maat states, "I have not stolen land," revealing an ethical ideal seemingly at odds with the ambitions of empire. Maritime expansion transformed the world. It brought commerce, technology, and the growth of states, but also conquest, dispossession, enslavement, displacement, disease, cultural destruction, economic dependency, and innumerable human tragedies, the consequences of which remain subjects of debate and experience to this day. Amid these rival empires and competing ambitions lived an English goldsmith. He commands no armies, he sailed with no fleet, yet kings depended upon his credit. His name was Edward Backwell. Mercantilism, however, was an economic system based on the belief that national power and self-sufficiency depended upon the accumulation of wealth. In mercantilist thought, wealth constituted silver and gold. But not all wealth was extracted from mines. Much wealth was acquired through trade, seized through conquest, or obtained through piracy, also known as privateering. The vast majority of the world's wealth during the early 17th century came from the mines of Spanish colonial Americas, Potosi of Peru, and Zacatecas in Mexico. Gold, however, was seized by Spanish forces led by Hernan Cortez, who had conquered the Aztec Empire and plundered the wealth of Montezuma. Thousands of pounds of intricate and priceless gold ornaments were melted down into bullion bars for easier transport to Europe. Around the same time, Francisco Pizarro conquered the Inca Empire in Peru, executed Emperor Atahualpa, and stripped Inca temples of approximately 13,000 pounds of gold and 26,000 pounds of silver, sending it to Europe. Not all European gold came from the Americas. Much of the gold that reached England, Portugal, and the Dutch Republic originated in West Africa. Powerful African states, including the Akan kingdoms and the early Ashanti Empire, controlled important gold-producing regions. Captives taken in wars between African states were often forced to work in the mines. In 1482, Portuguese merchants received permission from local Akan rulers to construct El Mina Castle in exchange for military protection against rival states. By the mid-17th century, the Dutch had seized El Mina from Portugal and transformed it into one of the principal centers of the transatlantic slave trade. Gold from the Akan states, ivory from the interior, and an average of roughly 30,000 enslaved Africans annually passed through Dutch merchant networks, contributing significantly to the wealth of the Dutch Republic. Between 1600 and 1650, England acquired much of its gold through privateering against Spanish shipping and through trade with Spain and the Spanish Netherlands, particularly Flanders. France, lacking major colonies that produced gold or silver, relied instead on trade surpluses, tariffs, and privateering to obtain precious metal. During the mid-17th century, England declined into civil war between King Charles I and his royalist cavaliers and the Roundheads, supporters of Parliament. Religion played a central role in the conflict. Many parliamentarians feared that Charles, influenced by his Catholic queen and Archbishop William Laud, was attempting to steer England back toward Catholicism and rule as an absolute monarch. The immediate crisis erupted when Charles sought to impose English-styled worship upon Presbyterian Scotland, provoking armed resistance and setting in motion a series of wars that lasted from 1642 to 1651. The conflict ultimately led to the trial and execution of King Charles I and the establishment of a commonwealth. Although England was declared a republic, power increasingly became concentrated in the hands of Oliver Cromwell, whose protectorate evolved into a military-backed regime. The social upheaval left by years of war had consequences. Thousands of soldiers were discharged, royalist families were impoverished, and some cavaliers saw their estates confiscated. Amid widespread economic distress and weak law enforcement, England entered the golden age of the highwayman. While many highwaymen were common thieves, others were former royalist soldiers embittered by defeat. They preyed upon coaches, merchants, and at times tax revenues moving across England's dangerous roads, turning the transport of gold and silver into a perilous undertaking. Ironically, the insecurity created by war and highway robbery encouraged merchants, tax collectors, and wealthy landowners to rely increasingly upon Goldsmith bankers.